This is the Teachable Soul Podcast. Because we cannot possibly live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves, let's take a few moments to learn from the mistakes of others. The Teachable Soul Podcast, where guests and listeners like you share stories of failure and teachable moments on the journey to success. Here's your host, Kat Daniels.
Hello again, and welcome back, my fellow Teachable Souls. I want to take just a moment to remind everyone that ratings and reviews help this podcast to get to the people who need it the most. So if you like it, please feel free to share, rate, or review in whichever podcast application you are currently using to listen today. Also, feel free to follow along on social media. On Twitter, we are Teachable Soul, and everywhere else, it's The Teachable Soul, including our website. If you'd like to sign up for our email list for just updates on the show, and sometimes I write some musings on my website, you can do that at theteachablesoul.com. I promise not to use it very often. And now I'm very excited to introduce to everyone today the owner and operator of Metamorphosis 101, which I love the name, which is a life and career coaching service. The owner is Sarah Wong. She was adopted from birth and struggled with understanding her identity in her mid-20s as a result. After years of struggling, she finally reached out to her biological family in 2019, and this connection unlocked a part of herself that she never knew existed. Sarah has since dedicated her career to helping others find their own path and started Metamorphosis 101. Sarah is a passionate mental health advocate and aims to enable opportunities and bring greater awareness for those who suffer from mental health. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on today. I know that you're a huge mental health advocate and that you kind of suffered a little bit yourself from that, and that's where that stems from. So let's start with Metamorphosis first, 101.
Sure.
How you started that and where like the name came from and just everything about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Metamorphosis 101 is sort of the product, I guess, of my whole life's work. I started it earlier this year. I actually found myself unemployed for the second time right before pandemic and COVID. And there was sort of the mass unemployment all across the country that we saw. Right. And I was working at a nonprofit in a job that just probably wasn't the best fit for me. And losing that job sort of left me at a real crossroads in my life. And I had to really think hard about what I wanted to do next. And I knew that I had always been interested in entrepreneurship and doing my own thing. That had sort of always been what my full-time jobs were working towards, right? To someday start my own business and do my own thing. And so finding myself kind of thrown out into the world earlier this year, I knew I wanted to do either freelance work, digital media, content creation, that sort of thing. And then a month later, I saw unemployment rates skyrocketing around me. And I was actually previously certified as a professional resume writer. My longest job that I ever held was at a nonprofit working with military veterans as they transition from service. So sort of putting the pieces together, looking at the situation of the world, as well as thinking about my past work history and how much I loved helping people find jobs, especially those in transition. I thought, okay, maybe instead of freelance content creation, I could do freelance career coaching. So I hired a couple coaches of my own. And one of them, she really helped me with understanding my core values and what really, how I want to operate myself, like what values I want to operate from. And the thing that she made very important is to know that those core values are not just necessarily about my work, but about me as a human, right? Like where anything that I involve myself in should stem back to these values. And we determined for me that those values are dedication, fairness, and love. And combining my knowledge of transitions, my career coaching history, the idea and the name just sort of came to me of my own metamorphosis and my own transformation that I had been through. And I thought about teaching people how to also make it through a successful transition after facing quite a bit of trauma, mental health issues. And I thought, Metamorphosis 101, I can teach people sort of the basics of how to transform their life. And that's where the name Metamorphosis 101 came from. And slowly but surely, I've been working with different clients, building up the business, and it's just been a really exciting new venture and step forward in my life.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That's really phenomenal. That's so funny though, because my husband is Army. We've moved around a lot, and I've come across a couple of organizations that do that for veterans after they've come out of the military. So I don't know if you want to name it or not, but if you don't, that's okay.
Oh yeah, I do actually. It's called Swords to Plowshares. It's here in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was the best job that I ever worked in my life. I totally loved my time there, and I sort of faced my downfall in life actually by leaving that job. I was sort of working in a position there as a job developer and as a workforce manager in a capacity that was really well fit for me. And it's where I probably should have stayed. But of course, at that time, my priorities were maybe not the best. And I was thinking, I need a big shiny job at a big tech company. I need, the big job title and all the big money. And I need all of this stuff. I was really going after what I thought I needed, or what the society around me was sort of saying is the best value, right? So I started chasing after this life that really wasn't the best suited for me. And when I left Swords to Plowshares and went into a tech position, I only lasted in that role for maybe 3 months, and I got fired actually. And ever since then, it's just been sort of the journey to find myself again. That's sort of been what the last 3.5 years have been for me in my life.
So what year was all of that exactly?
Yeah. So I left Swords, it was early in 2018. So almost 3 years ago. And I ended up getting fired from the tech job. It was actually just a contract position. But of course, I didn't really understand sort of how easy it is to lose a contract position. So I hedged my bets in the wrong way. And I lasted there till about May of 2018. And then May of 2018, I found myself unemployed for the first time in my life. And when I got out of college, I went right to school. Right out of school, I got a job, and I had never really in my entire life experienced not having anything to do, so it was sort of the first time in my life facing something like that. And it was just a huge sort of ego check, I guess. It was very, very, very humbling. And I ended up having to deliver food, for Grubhub and Caviar for a little bit just to make ends meet. And I was really just scrambling to try to put the pieces back together without really giving myself time to really process what I was doing and what I should do next. And that sort of led me to making some bad decisions, poor decisions, for a couple more years until, like I said earlier this year, finally just having to come back into myself and really do some hard looking back into myself, some major teachable moments for me earlier this year. I can maybe delve a little bit deeper if you have any questions about that.
I have so many. Yes. I cannot tell you how many times people come on here and they're like, end of 2019, beginning of 2020 was like it for me. I have you in that same boat. So
wow.
Yeah, the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020 held some big things for me as well. So I can kind of understand, like emotionally anyway, where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
So what started happening in 2019 or at what point did you start realizing that you needed to kind of focus more on your decisions and actually like either mourn or deal with things or whatever it was that you needed during that time?
Yeah. So you did mention briefly that I was adopted, and being adopted was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, but it also posed some of the biggest challenges in my life, especially as I moved into my mid-20s or so. Because growing up, I always had like curiosities about, different qualities and quirks about my personality that were so different to my family. I have a sister who was also adopted. She's not blood related to me. So, I would notice differences in her, major differences in my parents. And when I was younger, that curiosity it wasn't enough to really impede my life in many ways. But the older that I grew, the more and more curious I became about these qualities. And in my mid-20s, as I started to make different decisions and my life became more challenging, not knowing where I come from became more and more and more difficult, to a point that I was quite paranoid and quite concerned, about my true origins and where I actually really come from. And it got so, you also mentioned, me being mental health advocate, this plays very much into my mental health, not knowing that and having so many questions around that. It really affected my ability to sort of function. And around end of 2019 actually was the time where it finally all came to a head. And it was actually just about a year ago. It was in November of 2020 last year that my colleague at the time helped me. He's very into genealogy. He loves, tracing his own personal ancestry and all of that. And I kind of told him about some of my concerns, and him and my colleagues noticed that I was, being affected by this, and that it was something that I needed to figure out. And even in therapy, my therapist had also really encouraged me to take this step forward to find them and to talk to them. So I finally got my biological grandmother's phone number, gave her a call. Actually, I ended up getting my biological grandfather first. Come to find out that she was also adopted from birth. And she also had an insane curiosity to find out who she was and where she comes from. So she had spent the last maybe 2 years before I spoke with her, actually going on Ancestry, going on 23andMe, and putting together our whole genealogical history. So when I found her, she was kind enough to send me what she discovered about where we come from. So in finding her, not only did I sort of make that connection that was super necessary for me in my life back to my biological family, but I also gained all of this information about where I come from and, who my ancestors were. And it has just, like I said, like we said in the intro, sort of opening up this whole new side of myself that I never knew existed. It's quite literally that. It's been just an incredible experience to fill in parts of myself that felt almost like a void before, and
right.
Yeah, it's just been such an incredible experience. That's really it's just that need to find out where I come from and who my roots are. And then finally finding that has contributed incredibly to my ability to successfully build my business, to gain the confidence that I have today, to, really be in touch with myself. I basically was in the midst of a really bad identity crisis. And I'm just so glad that I'm kind of on the other side of it now. And I have so many of the answers that I was seeking.
So I have 2 nieces and they're both adopted as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what were some of the questions that you were asking yourself during those times that were answered once you were able to speak with your grandmother?
Like health history, that sort of thing. Like that was something that came up very often was, does your family have a history of illness? That was something that I had no idea about, just any sort of question. And I guess as not all adoptees, I don't think, are as affected by this. And I actually know many, many adoptees who don't really have these same sort of questions or feelings. And even my sister, who is also adopted,
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have the same sort of curiosity that I did. I don't know if I can maybe blame my ancestors for that curiosity or not, but I think the health history thing was the biggest one that just continued to come up over and over and over. And not knowing that was, especially as I grew older, it became sort of concerning and alarming. Like, what if I am prone to something and I don't know about it?
Right.
That sort of, became challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not adopted, but I have some of the same. I was just speaking with my mother the other day because no female in my family, like that has come before me that I'm aware of, has gone through menopause. Every one of them, my mom's mom, and her mom all had their stuff, and my aunt on my dad's side all had their ovaries and uterus removed before they ever hit that age. And so they never went through like natural menopause, and
Wow.
so I have no idea what to expect.
Wow.
I'm almost past all of the ages that they had everything removed. So I don't know if I'm in the clear or not, but like, if I were to ever go into menopause, I don't know if I would hit it early or on time, or if there is a time. I have no clue what to expect. So yeah, I can definitely understand where you would want to know your medical bare minimum. Yeah. Those are questions I would definitely ask as well. So where are your biological family? Where are they from?
So I was actually born in South Lake Tahoe. And I guess they lived there for a few years after I was born. And my birth mom, probably, I think she said maybe a few months after I was born, she ended up kind of road tripping to Louisiana. And she said when she landed there, her heart sort of just fell in love with the area. And she's been there ever since. So she's in Louisiana, and my biological grandparents are in Missouri. They have a home as well in Michigan. And then I have other families sort of scattered all throughout the United States.
So was it like immediate after you met with or spoke with your grandmother that like all of your questions were answered and you felt confident and everything was fixed, or what happened?
Yeah. So the moment that I spoke with them, I can't tell you. I mean, it was like, I've always been like a bit of a spiritual person, but this connection reminded me of the value of spirituality and spiritual connection, because just simply like hearing her voice and knowing that I'm talking to somebody that I'm blood related to, that was as well, to actually answer your previous question. That was another question that came up often, or just a thought was, man, I am 28 years old and I've never spoken to somebody that I'm blood related to. That thought just came up to me very often. And it was such a weird thing to sort of reconcile with. And talking to her for the first time, talking to my grandfather as well for the first time, was like, oh my gosh, these are people that I am blood related to. Like, this is such a cool experience. You know, it's simply the knowledge that I'm talking to somebody that I'm blood related to was so cool, because it was just the first time that I had that experience. And kind of in that moment, I felt just this wash of like relief, like the weight sort of lifted off. And of course it wasn't just like this instantaneous thing where all of a sudden I was just cured of all my issues, but it certainly was the starting point of my true recovery from my mental health, the worst of my mental health issues. And it really sort of springboarded my ability to really understand myself. And I haven't had as good of a sense of who I am really ever in my life as I have had over this last year. And I just want to point out the fact again that this is my experience as an adoptee, and other adoptees out there, you know, who may be listening to this, may have a completely opposite experience, or they may not, you know, have any desire to ever reach out to their family. But I just do think that my experience, for anybody out there that was adopted, that does have this sort of curiosity, or that has had these same sort of thoughts, you know, how sort of healing it's been for me has been quite alarming. Like, I had no idea. I mean, I knew it was going to help me, but I had no idea just how much it would really kind of make me whole again, you know? And I guess I didn't even realize how broken apart I was. And it sort of took going through this experience to feel the feeling of wholeness right now that I just didn't really understand before. And it's been just really incredible and relieving and powerful. And it's certainly helped me in my work as a coach, and in being able to sort of mentor and provide really compassionate support for my clients.
I bet. Yeah. I know many coaches, like some of them are my very close friends, and they, you have to do a lot of work on yourself during and, you know, before even you can start coaching other people to do the same work, basically.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go through it.
Yeah,
as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for your experience too, I think that probably the 23andMe, I mean, I would imagine anyways, that the 23andMe could have helped in that process as well a lot. Mm-hmm. I know, you know, again, I'm not adopted. I never have, you know, had any questions like that, but just I have one of those, and so does my brother. He recently got his, and I wanted to know my daughter's grandmother on my husband's side. So she has a pretty significant, severe disease that could be passed down through the genes, basically. So I really, really was interested to know hers to see if our daughter could potentially have it, because we're already having health issues with her. So it would be really helpful if I could know, that
absolutely
potential thing that's bothering her now, because it is a thing, and it's not something that doctors usually check for, especially in a younger age. So, I mean, I can only imagine how, at a bare minimum, that could have helped give you peace of mind, basically.
Yeah, I'm a huge, huge advocate for the whole DNA exploration and finding, that, because regardless of whether or not you're adopted, I think the majority of people don't really know where they come from, and they don't really have that understanding of their ancestors. And just simply that experience for me, again, regardless of being adopted or not, having a glossary of my ancestors and looking at back, multiple generations back of my ancestors and seeing who they were and what they did.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how incredibly amazing of an experience that has been. And maybe not everybody has that curiosity, or maybe not everybody cares to know that. But if you do have a level of curiosity around that, I would strongly encourage anybody out there to do some of that work and to take some time to look back throughout that, because it's a really cool sort of learning lesson. And it really does help you sort of get outside of this life a little bit, and think about history and how things have been historically for people. And yes, we're living in this extremely crazy and challenging time right now, but man, our ancestors had it so much worse in many cases. And reading some of their stories and listening to what life was like back in the 15 or 1600s, it's just man, it really does make you appreciate sort of where we are today, even despite living in a pandemic, living with the political discourse we have. I have been saved very much by, having that perspective, particularly this year. It's been very helpful to have that knowledge and that information and that perspective to get me through this pandemic, and this crazy year. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and two, for me, I mean, you mentioned kind of spirituality as well. Just looking at the DNA results and where in location on the world my ancestors came from somehow makes me feel more connected to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which gives me, I don't know, it also makes me feel like they're all there, whether I like it or not, basically, or whether I know them or not. They're watching from somewhere, they're making sure that everybody's okay, which makes me feel good.
Yeah.
So I also read somewhere where where it said that you suffered from generalized anxiety disorder.
Yes.
So you suffer from generalized anxiety disorder, which I do too.
Yes.
How did you suffer from generalized anxiety disorder, or how did you get diagnosed, I guess?
Yeah. So I've always been a very anxious person, thinking back to even my young childhood. I remember some of my first random anxiety where I think generalized anxiety comes is because generalized anxiety disorder, as it's basically your baseline is anxious, where most people baseline at neutral, we baseline at anxious. So I remember as a kid being super anxious about addressing people and not knowing if it's okay to say people's names or if I should say hey, you or something. And I remember being inside of my head as an 8-year-old, oh my God, I don't know how to address people. Right. And that was sort of the beginning of it. And then when I was 12, I suffered a really bad injury, just continuing to contribute more and more to my anxiety, more and more to my fear and panic of, my body and feeling, I have to really nurture my injury. And over time, the anxiety just grew worse and worse. And of course, unfortunately, I was also just sort of feeding that anxiety with the wrong sort of diet, not having a good sleeping schedule, not really taking care of myself. And it really all came to a head again around, I would say my anxiety started to get really bad, maybe around 2017, a year before I left Swords to Plowshares. And then when I got into that contract job at the tech company, I remember before I went to that job, I was I'm going to get into therapy. Therapy is my number one priority. Once my healthcare kicks in, I'm getting into therapy. And of course, I lost that job after 3 months before I had access to healthcare. So I wasn't able to see a therapist until basically a year after that. But come October of 2018, when I got my basically the last job that I lost earlier this year. I landed that job around October of 2018. And it was around that time, that was the time where I was like, I am going to do everything to keep this job so that I can get into therapy and I can get into care. And so that's why it says my diagnosis was January of 2019, because that's when I was finally able to have healthcare, be able to finally see a specialist. And it wasn't much of a surprise to me that I received the diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, just because I knew that I was such an anxious person. I mean, I was anxious about just existing, simply getting up in the morning and doing anything was extremely challenging at certain points because of how bad it got. But generalized anxiety disorder, as you probably know, it's a very livable disease. It's something that, if you do the right things, if you practice mindfulness, if you take care of yourself, if you, have a really good daily routine, if you sort of know what you're doing, then a lot of that anxiety is relieved. Obviously, anxiety sort of comes from uncertainty, right? So when you have a lot of uncertainty, the symptoms only get worse. At least that was my experience. So bringing just a really solid foundation of certainty back into my life has really, really, really helped me. And of course, I've been seeing my therapist regularly now for almost, I guess we're coming up on 2 years now. And I just have a whole different way that I live now that allows me to sort of keep in front of my anxiety. And it's been just an incredible sort of journey through all of it.
Right. I bet. So you talk a little bit about how your mental health has now benefited from the transitions that you've all been through, but also like spiritually, how you're doing?
Oh my gosh. So finding my spirituality, I guess we can go back maybe to about 2015 for that. So around 2015, I was in a bad relationship with somebody. I was with the guy just to be with somebody. I just didn't want to be alone, And one day we were out on a hike and I sat down on this bench and my heart rate was like, it was out of control. And I have blood pressure problems, which is really something to keep in mind, as well as that was another thing I was curious about with my bloodline, was knowing if they have any history of heart disease or something, because I had heart issues. And heart issues are sort of, it makes sense with anxiety, right? Because if you're anxious, your heart rate might be, going higher or whatever. So I was sitting on this bench. I was having an awful day, with my ex-boyfriend. He was just being really mean. He didn't really want to, I forced him to go on this hike with me. He didn't really care about it. And so I just sat down and closed my eyes and I meditated for the first time, kind of on accident. And I remember just like slowing down and my brain didn't think for just a second. And it was so amazing to not think about anything for just 1 second. And I was like, ooh, okay, that was nice.
Right.
And so I just started breathing, deep breathing exercises. And of course, with time and not having, a meditation teacher or a real spiritual center or anything to fall back into, I sort of just tried to learn meditation and breathing techniques. And I used them to sort of keep my heart rate under control. But I didn't really think of it as like a super spiritual thing. I thought of it more as just like a way to keep my heart rate under control. But last year, I decided to sort of take meditation a little bit more seriously. And I started doing like virtual meditation sessions and things like that. And just sort of from the information that I was receiving from my therapist, like encouraging me to reach out to my biological family, as well as then finding them, come to find out, again, to reference back to my ancestors, but my ancestors were very spiritual people. Like many of them were like spiritual leaders, and my family themselves like are all very spiritual people. They're all very, very active in their churches. And I really couldn't deny my spirituality anymore, having this information and just knowing that this was a really important thing for me and where I come from, sort of. So I've been daily meditating now every day since maybe January of this year. And I have had just so much relief and so much more certainty. And I just feel so much better having that spiritual pathway, I guess, that I've really gained mostly through meditation and through connecting back to myself in that way. And, I'm not necessarily religious, I would say, but I am a very spiritual person. I do a lot every single day. I pray very much. I have a prayer journal. I have a gratitude journal. I do daily affirmations. My spirituality is very important to me. I do a lot of like energy balancing, that sort of stuff. And yeah, just being in touch with that side of my spirituality has been a really really important addition back into my life, which was something as well. I mean, regardless of finding my biological family or not, adding that element back into my life this year has been very important. And as well, it's contributed probably equally as much to my improved mental health as anything else.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So what is, you said energy balancing?
Yes.
What's that?
So I do gosh, this is going a little spiritual, but yeah, like chakra balancing. So like frequency meditation, listening to certain frequency sounds, and certain frequencies actually balance out your energy centers, the chakras, they call them.
Yeah.
Kind of aligning the chakras through sound frequency.
Is this related to like sound healing I've heard about?
Yes. It's essentially sound healing. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Yeah. I've heard about these things. And like, sometimes I actually will turn on like a YouTube video or something that says just something that strikes me as, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Go to sleep too, because I have one of my biggest struggles is like being able to go to sleep quickly. That has helped me immensely over the past few months.
Oh yeah. So this is not necessarily energy healing, but another thing that I've been doing recently, it's called Vipassana meditation. And what Vipassana is, it's essentially actively knowing that you're breathing in any given moment and paying direct attention to the air coming in your nose or your mouth and the air going out. You're intentionally focusing your energy directly into the fact that you're breathing. And I have been doing this every day now for about 15 days. And it's just been an incredibly helpful tool for me to focus into the fact that I'm breathing. And it sort of helps to dissolve away any of those thoughts. Like if your brain is overthinking and you can't get yourself to stop thinking, just focusing your attention back to your breath. It's an incredibly helpful technique that I have found to relieve a lot of my anxiety, and sort of doing that on a consistent daily basis has really helped alleviate not only the shorter term anxiety symptoms, but the longer term anxiety symptoms as well.
Yeah. Anytime anybody tells me that they're like struggling or having a hard time, and I'm like, well, have you meditated today? And they're like, I don't know how to do that. Well, let me tell you, you just should. Just sit there and close your eyes and breathe. That's all you do. It's so easy.
Exactly. Just taking a few seconds every day, and like I said, for me, it started really just as like breathing to calm my heart down. But little did I know that it would end up opening all of these spiritual channels within me. And, I went from being sort of agnostic and not really knowing what to believe in before. And now I feel like I just have a much better sense of that, of my spirit, of my personal spirituality, simply through breathing. It's crazy
Right.
how it's very simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Yeah, the spirituality has been something that kind of just like smacked me upside the head type thing as like a note from all the other stuff I've been doing. I'm like, I need to go on a self journey, and I need to learn how to meditate. And then it's like, oh, hey, you're spiritual, by the way, you're a spiritual being. And it smacks you upside the head. That's what happened to me.
Oh yeah. I think it's hard. I mean, I think in the Western world, especially, it's just something that we don't prioritize very much.
Right.
In the West. And I think that this year, if there's ever been a time for us in this Western world to adopt spirituality, this is the year, this is the year to do it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If ever, like, there has never been a better time other than this year. Trust.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's so funny to me too, how like 2019, because for some reason in my brain, 2020, like January 1 of 2020 started like this whole huge domino effect. But every time I talk to somebody, it amazes me how it actually kind of started near the end of 2019.
It was like November or so of 2019 last year that I don't know what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cosmos must have aligned somewhere, because man, they unleashed some heck.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been one thing that I've been trying to keep into perspective, is the idea or the concept that while this isn't what we want by any means, it's very likely what we need as a society. Everything that's happened this year, the way that we've been forced to sort of slow down and reassess and really think harder about what we want to be doing. And again, just to loop back to my work as a career coach, that's really been the biggest inspiration for why I want to help folks and why I want to work with my clients, and sort of the impact that I'm going for with my clients is to help people find whatever it is that they actually really want to be doing. Because I think many of us up until this pandemic, we're just sort of going through the motions of life to, get food on the table, meet our basic needs, while sort of neglecting so many other really important parts of our existence,
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when you work with people as a career coach, do you do their resume for them? And then also what exactly are you doing?
Yeah. So I was previously certified as a resume writer. So I do help folks with resume writing, LinkedIn profile strategy, as well as I call myself sort of like a soft skill expert. I've been doing career coaching for many years, and I really like to tailor my approach to each individual's needs. So I sort of can really assess based on a case-by-case basis what any individual may need. And I've worked with such a diverse population. Having my background working with veterans, that's why I love having worked with veterans, because veterans deserve the support that I provided, but also that there's such a diverse group of people, so I was able to work with so many different types of people at so many different levels, which gave me just a lot of knowledge and experience of how to sort of leverage different opportunities for different people at many different places of life. And so that's really where I would say my skill is the best as a career coach, is just simply in helping people go through transitions in their career. So if they're really looking to jump into a totally different industry or do something that they've never done, that's really the area that I can help kind of steward people through and sort of make it through the mental challenges, the emotional challenges that may come along with that. I can really help people in getting through those challenges, the things that sort of come along with making a career transition that maybe people won't anticipate. I like to help folks sort of understand those things and address them as they come up.
Yeah. The transitions of any job, whether you're, veteran or not, can be incredibly sometimes daunting, but also spiritual, I guess. You have to mourn the job if you lost it, and it depends on your situation. And yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. And I know so many people this year, I imagine have faced that, losing a job for the first time in their life and really having to reassess, man, if I do go back to work, is what I was doing what I want to do again, and helping people really figure that pathway out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then they have to, now decide if they want to work from home as well, because for some people that's more important. It's a crazy world out there to try to find right now. Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. And I just have a bleeding heart to help people. That's really what I want to do. And I think just based on what I'm good at, I think the best way that I can help people is through Metamorphosis 101 and through the career coaching, that I've been building up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, that's phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and everything with us. I know that you had written in and said that your main teachable moment was about learning to truly honor your authentic self by not leading your life from a place of fear and scarcity. Did you learn that through going through the whole process of looking for your biological family and losing your job last year? Was that what led to that?
Absolutely. So I think back to a year ago, what you're talking about, that turning point, end of October or so last year. And I just remember at that point in my life, I was surrounded by so much fear and so much doubt and so much uncertainty. And that was the lens in which I was living my life, was just through this. I don't have enough money. I'm poor. I'm not good enough. I'm terrible at my job, just kind of living my life through that really sort of negative lens, and coming out the other side, shifting my perspective into just a more positive and hopeful perspective, knowing that there is hope out there. I am capable. There is something that I'm worth. And if I continue to believe that I'm not good enough or that I don't have enough, that's sort of what's just going to continue happening, right? But if I can tap into, no, you do have enough. You are capable. You are worthy. You are good enough. You are, you've done enough. And sort of shifting into that other gear has really helped me to sort of find the success and find the growth that I have this year. And just being able to really embrace failure. I was so afraid of failing. I was so afraid of rejection. I was so afraid of being told no that I would sort of, do anything that I could to prevent that from happening. And it sort of took the universe rejecting me in every single possible way and sort of losing everything to really realize that there is more, that I am capable, that living in a mind of scarcity it's just not a sustainable and healthy way to be.
Right. Yeah. I loved what you said at the beginning when you said that your 3 core values are dedication, fairness, and love. Mm-hmm. That everything that you said today basically encompasses all of those. So that's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If anyone were to want to hire you or work with you, how would they be able to get a hold of you?
So connect with me on LinkedIn. Hopefully we can put the correct, because my name is Sarah Wong, so I may not be the easiest to find just because there's probably many other Sarah Wongs on LinkedIn. But yeah, if you do connect with me there, send me a quick message that says mindfulness toolkit. And I actually have a whole little mindfulness worksheet that I would be more than happy to send. But yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, and that's absolutely the best place to get in touch with me right now.
Awesome. Yeah, the link that I have here says Sarah Wong M as in Mary and G as in go. So maybe that will, if you type all that in, maybe that'll help.
Yeah. I think it's linkedin.com/in/Sarah M Wong or Sarah Wong MG, like you said. Yeah.
Yep. That's what I have here. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, are there any other little tidbits that you want to share with us before we head off?
Again, just be open to failure, be open to being told no. If somebody isn't in 100% agreement with you on something, that's totally okay. Don't be afraid to do the things that you're the scaredest to do. They say you have to the only way out is through, right? So just embrace your fears and charge forward with life without fear. That's what I would have to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm all about failing forward. That's phenomenal.
Fail forward. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sarah. And I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You too.
You have been listening to the Teachable Soul Podcast. You can find us on any social media platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram as The Teachable Soul, or on Twitter as Teachable Soul. Also, if you'd like to help support the show, you can find us at patreon.com/The Teachable Soul. You can also visit our website for more information at theteachablesoul.com.